Hello everybody. So it is Sunday morning and Saylor has not posted his usual I bought Bitcoin, and we'll see. I'm pretty sure he bought Bitcoin. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he just did the convertible buyback. But anyways, probably his tweet coming up in the next hour or two. The main point that I have for today's video is promoting Shipcoins, MSTR stock. Of course, this is in response to a YouTuber that I really like, who made an anti-strategy video, or an against anti-stretch video. And frankly, if you watch at his anti-stretch video, all I take away is that he's really not that anti-stretch, and maybe that's because I follow this instrument too closely and I follow MSTR too closely, that whenever I hear a video complaining about it, I kind of think they're actually, promoting it. I don't know why. That's how I feel in general. But yeah, this YouTuber complaining about, for example, the oil ad, the Bitcoin refinery ad. It seems like these ads are making more traditional people upset, and I think we have to get very much used to these ads. This is the future of marketing. One person, one ad is very much the future of marketing. And yeah, this ad may not resonate with somebody, but it will resonate with someone else, and we'll have millions of ads in no time. So we have to get used to these ads, and for some people, they still look very, very cringe, but unfortunately, they will evolve. So I want to talk a little bit about this anti-STRC video, which in my view is not really one, but I want to talk about it. So point number one, it's the maxi take, which is that pure form Bitcoin is better than anything else. And Saylor has said it multiple times. I have said it multiple times. We've all said it. We all say this. Yes, Bitcoin, actual pure form Bitcoin, is better than just about anything else. It is so true. If you own a stock, if you own a preferred stock, if you own MSTR, technically you don't own that stock. Technically, it is some holder of record company in New York City that owns a physical, and I don't think there's physical copies anymore, but at least in the early days, they would own the quote-unquote physical copy of your stock. The bearer version of your stock is owned by some company who gives you an IOU that actually represents your share. So technically, yes, the only Bitcoin you can hold is the 12 or 24 word cold wallet pass key that you own in your brain. Technically, we all agree with that. I don't think there's any debates. Stocks are not a bearer assets. You depend on a third party. You depend on your broker, allowing you to access the money. Right. So nothing replaces cold storage Bitcoin. And this is especially true if you, say, live in a country that doesn't have, semi-strong institutions, or strong institutions. Well, is there such a thing as strong institutions? But at least semi-strong institutions, right? If you live in a war-torn country, you should probably have 100% of your capital in BTC. No financial advice, right? But in some countries, it makes a lot of sense. If you live in a Western country with some semi-rule of law and with some semi-established rules around companies, probably a much smaller portion of your capital belongs in true form BTC. Probably a much smaller portion. Is it 5%? Is it 10%? I don't know. It depends on your risk appetite, but probably a much smaller portion, because there's a lot of tremendous downside to cold storage BTC. One of the big downsides is you can't borrow against it, for example. That's one of the big downsides, right? We still live halfway into this new Bitcoin-based economy, which I dream about, and we live halfway in this fiat economy. We still have 1 foot in the fiat economy, 1 foot in the the hard money economy. We're halfway in between, right? And so if you just own cold storage Bitcoin, you're not taking advantage of shorting the currency and shorting the dollar, of course. And of course, Saylor is actively shorting the dollar with stretch, right? You're actively shorting the currency, so you have to still have one foot in the financial system. There's also another risk to owning pure form Bitcoin, which is, of course, security, operation security. How many people actually get their hard wallet Bitcoin stolen? It's actually still common to these days, and the hacks get better and better and better. And so while it does make sense for some portion of capital for everybody, I believe in the West, it's probably a much smaller portion of your capital in the West that probably belongs in a cold wallet. At least that's what I think. And this is where instruments like MSTR or instruments like STRC come. And because it's true that you can't redeem MSTR for Bitcoin and you can't redeem STRC for Bitcoin, right? That's part of the argument of this YouTuber against strategies. You can't redeem it for Bitcoin, while some ETFs you can. Yeah, that's technically true, but it's a different thing. You're not buying Bitcoin when you buy MSTR. You're buying a proxy, and this has never fooled anybody. We all know we're buying a proxy. We all know we can't get Saylor's Bitcoin. We're buying a proxy, but a proxy is good enough for most people, provided that you have secured your what Shamat Palihapitiya calls schmuck insurance, right? Providing that you have secured your schmuck insurance in case everything collapses, you have some cold storage Bitcoin, provided that you're already there, check mark. Then owning a company, in my view, is just fine. It's just fine. And then I want to talk about specifically. So specifically, this YouTuber is saying that Saylor is promoting Shipcoins because he's retweeting about these DeFi protocols. And of course, I believe this has to do with the Terra Luna stigma. Terra Luna failed. And there's been many protocols like that failed, right? And to me, this is a little bit like Flight. Flight did not work until it finally did. We are going to have a Bitcoin-backed stable at some point. We just have never succeeded yet. We haven't succeeded yet. But I believe at some point it makes a lot of sense that we're going to have a stablecoin backed by Bitcoin. The new version, the new flavor is those stablecoins backed by Stretch. Why is Saylor retweeting those? Well, because it helps strategy. There's two sides to this story, right? It helps strategy that, there's an investment from these protocols into strategy. Silly example, perhaps, but, Anthropic received a major investment from FTX, from Bankman-Fried. Right? Bankman-Fried and FTX failed. Anthropic didn't. But Bankman-Fried failed. Did Anthropic succeed because of the money partially received from Bankman-Fried? Yeah, I think so. He was very, very early in investing in Anthropic. So we don't know if these are going to fail. It's true that these yields, for example, 70%, 50%, they look very scary, but you have to understand that in DeFi, it's always how it begins and then the yield normalizes. Like, these yields are not the long-term yields. They're promotional yields, right? As more money flows into the protocols, the yield will normalize. And will a leverage yield on Stretch be something like 20%? Probably something like that. Like, probably over a long term, maybe 20 to 25%. A leverage yield with a carry on top of it, right? Stretch with a carry, probably in the 20%, not 70%. But when these protocols get launched, by the nature of the imbalance of the liquidity in the protocol, the early money gets an enormous yield, which is not holding on over the long term. So anyways, a STRC stablecoin could very well work where a Bitcoin-backed stablecoin didn't. And the Bitcoin-backed stablecoin didn't work because of the volatility of Bitcoin. If Stretch removes the volatility, if you had one layer where you remove the volatility, this could very much work. And, this is where the analogy of gasoline work. Gasoline and oil, gasoline used to be thrown in the rivers because we didn't know what to do with it, because gasoline was too unstable, until they figured out how to create an engine to harness the volatility of gasoline. And of course, that was the automobile industry. That was that engine. Before that, the gasoline that was refined from oil, and you refine all sorts of different oil. The gasoline was one of the more useless results of refining oil, and then they found a way for it. They found a use for it, and so I think this is also true for Bitcoin. This is a form of refined Bitcoin, which is a little more explosive, but which may have a use in DeFi. And if it doesn't, if it fails, it will be a failure of these DeFi protocols. It will not necessarily be a failure of STRC. In fact, I don't believe if these protocols were to ever fail, I don't believe it would be a failure of STRC. It would be a failure of these protocols. But Flight did not work until it did. And at one point, that will work. At least that is what I think. And perhaps this time it will work. And lastly, I want to conclude with this. Is being a Bitcoin maxi still correct, still right in 2026? Because Saylor, that's probably his second year now, moving away from being a maxi. Yeah, he used to be a maxi. He's now much more nuanced, and he's actually addressed that. The reason why he's more nuanced is because the administration changed, and now the administration is warming up to crypto, is giving clarity to crypto. He's always said his reason for being a maxi in the past was that there was no securities law, and the whole ICO debacle, and if you look at some of his early videos, it was all about the fact that only Bitcoin was grandfathered into the system, recognized by the IRS as a commodity. Only Bitcoin had a clear framework. All of these quote-unquote staking networks, as he calls them, as Saylor calls them, didn't have a clear framework. Now we have an administration who's giving more of a framework for these networks, and with the Clarity Act, that's going to get even better. And so that's why he's warming up to these protocols. And I think he's right to do that, because these protocols are much bigger than quote-unquote crypto. So if you take ETH, Solana, Sui, I've been looking at some very interesting videos on Sui lately. Perhaps Hype is finance specific, right? Hype is trying to replace Intercontinental Exchange, the New York Stock Exchange. Hype is going specifically for stock exchanges. But if you take something like Sol, for example, it's actually a public computer network, right? It's a public computer network where computers where protocols can be built on it, and anybody can build a protocol on the Solana network. And when you build your code, when you build your protocol, you pay with Sol. Sol is what you pay the fees to build on that protocol. And so the first really mainstream app, it seems, what's really going mainstream is stablecoins. Stablecoins cannot be built on Bitcoin. Stablecoins are built on Ethereum or Solana. And I think this is the first very mainstream use of these staking networks without other uses, right? Like NFTs or DeFi or ICOs. They were not as mainstream as stablecoins. Stablecoins are going mainstream. They will be the first use. In my view, things like Solana, you're going to have many more things built on them. AI agents are going to use them. You're going to have sharing networks. You could have entire social media built on things like Solana that could replace WhatsApp and Facebook and Telegram. That could be replaced by a decentralized app created on Solana, perhaps spun up by an AI agent, by the way. Entire banks could be rebuilt on Solana, protocols with no employees, with no body. Entire lending markets could be rebuilt on this network. Stock exchanges, prediction markets, that might be another use case. A lot of companies that we have today, if you look at the map for S&P 500, look at the entire financial sector. And that begins with them, but it's more than this. Web3 is more than this. You could also put Meta in there, and you could also imagine these networks rebuilding an entire Meta, right? Isn't that the whole point of Nostr, right? Nostr is kind of similar to that, right? You're going to have entire protocols that are going to replace companies, and I think in the next 10, 20 years, it's going to be very, very interesting where you see entire protocols likely built by very small teams and eventually entirely built by AI agents. These protocols will be used by people, and there won't be a company out there, right? There will not be a company backing those. It will just be a protocol living in these staking networks. So is being a Bitcoin maxi still correct in 2026? Bitcoin maxis are very high virtue. I respect them. I also was a Bitcoin maxi at one point, but I think it's time to warm up to the fact that there's more than just Bitcoin. And of course, Solana and Sui, it's still the Wild West. It's still early. It's still tough to pick who's going to win, and Bitcoin already won. But I would not call them Shipcoins anymore. I wouldn't, especially in the case of Solana, for example. So I just wouldn't. Anyways, this is not investment advice. This is not financial advice. This is only entertainment. I'm hoping you were entertained. Please like, please subscribe, follow me on Patreon, follow me on X. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.